With King Curtis, so I only really know him from WCW briefly, and I'll step away from the mic where he goes, Sullivan, my son. And, with the Taskmaster and everything, and maybe a little bit with he was the Wizard in the WWF, wasn't he, when you were there, in
Yeah,
fact? What was
yeah.
he? What was his whole presentation in the 60s and 70s when he was active in the ring?
Oh, he was pre Bruiser. He was Bruiser Brody or Abdullah. He set the standards in Japan. He back to Lord Blears again. As much as he hated the Japanese for being torpedoed and his people being bombed and stuff, he after Fred Blassie, he became the president of the Japanese New Japan All Japan Pro Wrestling, and he was the one that had brought Curtis and Mark Lewin and those. So Curtis was the one that established that out of the ring, stacking chairs, fighting all over the building and everything else. So as he sort of passed it down to Abdullah and Bruiser Brody and everything, I think Brody even one time when he was alive, rest his soul, he even mentioned that Curtis is the one that took him around when he first came. Well, they took him to Australia, Frank Goodish to Australia, and from there he became with Lewin and Curtis. He became Bruiser Brody, and from Australia, they got booked because the Curtis had ties to Japan, so they took him. He went to Japan with him on the and did that that wild, aggressive, crazy style, all over the region that the Japanese people love.
I will have to ask you this because it just kept popped in my mind. Did you ever see Ricky Dozan on television?
When I was young, yeah, and I've seen clips lately of him, but they had Hawaii had sumo wrestlers coming through here as well, guys that would once they got out of the sumo, Ricky Dozan. I remember Toyona Bori and a couple other guys. I don't remember the names now, but I remember Toyona Bori because they had a massive 50-something inch chest, and he was a retired sumo. So we had retired sumos as well coming to wrestle, and the guys were saltier back then too. They weren't as trick oriented. They were a lot of less solid.
I miss those days, definitely. I'll ask you one more question with Hawaii because I tell you, I had to stop myself writing questions for you because it was almost like my eyes were falling out. My head was just, I've got to ask him this, I've got to ask him this, I've got to understand. But the one thing I will ask
Go
is,
ahead, we all out of time.
do you remember PPW, Lia Maivia, when she took over from Peter? I believe you wrestled for her.
Sure, yeah. I would come back. I would try to sneak into town when Peter and Leah had their promotion. I'd been working, in the mainland U.S. and working every night and just try to get away from the business for a while. And then my phone would ring 1 o'clock in the morning. It'd be Peter calling from some bar. But I need some help coming down. So yeah, I was their heel. They had this little Polynesian stable of wrestlers, and I assumed the heel role. In fact, we wrestled that Man Mountain David or Goliath, giant David, the English fella. Was a giant. He was a huge guy.
It wasn't Giant Haystacks, was it?
It could be. He wrestled in Calgary quite a bit.
He had a great big beard, about 6'8", like blue overalls, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the guy. He came and I think they had me locked in the cage or something. He was evidently, supposedly the guy I'd brought in to get rid of Peter, and hulking guy. So something happened. Somebody came out, let me out of the cage, and the three of us are in the ring and trying to, taking over on Peter. And Peter and I broke off and we're fighting and we're watching that giant. He's slowly getting smaller and smaller. And two huge Polynesian guys had him by the legs and pulled him out of the ring. So Peter and I immediately stopped fighting one another and jumped out of the ring to pull the guys off the giant. And he came back, grabbed his bag, went back to the airport, never stopped. I don't think he stopped to get paid off or anything. He'd flown all the way, driven from Saskatoon back to Calgary, flown from Calgary overnight, went straight to the locker room. He just had a miserable day. and just went back went back to the airport and said, "The hell with this! I'm going back to Calgary."
Was Peter Maivia like the man? Like, because you must have heard like the stories. Maybe a fight in Japan or two happened. Like, what was his reputation in the back? And did you ever see him in action? Unless it was with his wife arguing, obviously.
His wife was a tough son of a gun. They used to stand toe to toe. He was the man. He was a chief. He was. I've heard this reputation in England, and and then the run-ins he had with Billy and some other stuff, But he was always a consummate pro, around the boy. He remarked about that several times. It's, boy, I went the first time he went to England, he was about 2'5", 210, and they just beat the snot out of him. And then he came back about 280, and then he was he made it's the same thing they did with Hulk. They got him down, and they got him in the gym, and they taught him, and they'd beat him every day, and they'd beat him, and they'd beat him, and eventually, unless you're completely lost, you learn how to take care of yourself. Well, that's what Peter did, and he was a rugged guy to begin with, so he didn't need a lot of teaching, to develop into, an animal.